And now we're live.
Okay, I'm gonna pause it. I'll introduce Allan here in a moment, but just a little bit of housekeeping. This is a webinar, so we can't see or hear you at the moment. If you have questions, you can put them into the Q&A. We'll wait till the end to answer them, but if you do want to ask it live, go ahead, put it in the Q&A section, and then we'll ask you to unmute at the end of Allan's talk this morning. Other than that, we'll get started. I get to introduce the man who needs no introduction. Allan Savory was born in Zimbabwe and educated in South Africa. In 1960s, he made a significant breakthrough in understanding what was causing the degradation and desertification of the world's grassland ecosystems. And as a resource management consultant, worked with numerous managers on 4 continents to develop sustainable solutions. In 1992, he and his wife, Jody Butterfield, formed a nonprofit organization in Zimbabwe, the Africa Center for Holistic Management. And in 2009, the two of them and a group of colleagues co-founded the Savory Institute to serve the world through an international network of entrepreneurial innovators and leaders committed to serving their regions with the highest standard of holistic management training and implementation support. So the Africa Center became the first of the Savory Institute's locally led and managed hubs. Allan did a TED Talk in 2013 that received over 3.4 million views, and in 2014 was voted one of the 50 most intriguing TED Talks of all time. So we are so lucky to have Allan with us at the Western Slope, Colorado Food and Farm Forum. So I will hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, MJ. Slight correction there, it's over 7 million views now on that talk, and it's had a major impact, and it's led to millions of people now talking about livestock and their importance. So that's wonderful. Thank you, all of you, for the opportunity to talk with you today. I'm just very sorry that due to COVID, I'm not with you, and we're having to do it this way where I can't see any of you. I can only see my own face. It's very off-putting, but we have to do the best we can these days. Now, without agriculture, we cannot have an orchestra, a church, a university, a government, army, city, or any business. And the only economy that can sustain any city ultimately has to be based on food. In other words, the photosynthetic process of green plants growing on regenerative soil or regenerating soil. Now, no business or economy is sustainable until agriculture is sustainable, and neither is any city. Now, despite this self-evident fact that everybody should understand, when Allan Greenspan, the head of the Reserve Bank in the United States, retired and wrote his biography, I read all of it to try and see how he thought, and he mentioned agriculture once in passing. Economists who weigh heavily in the expertise advising politicians developing policy, so deep is the ecological illiteracy that they report that US agricultural production is less than 1% of GDP. And when we add the related industries of marketing and service chain all along that are included, it rises to about 5% of GDP. Now, those countries in the world in which agriculture features highest in their GDP are considered by World Bank economists to be countries too poor to sustain their economies. None of this makes sense. Now, American agriculture, producing far more dead, eroding soil than food, is the most destructive industry ever in history. more destructive than mining or fossil fuels as we face global warming, global desertification, mega fires, climate change. It is no exaggeration to say that climate change, in which agriculture is playing a major role, is not the beginning of our problems, it's the beginning of the end. Now, more than 20 civilizations have failed in all regions of the world because of agriculture in the past. And now the threat is globally to civilization. So what is your role as farmers? What can you constructively do? That's what I want to talk about today. The youth of today is quite rightly demanding that political leaders take action against climate change. But what action? Using our common sense, we all know that if we have any problem, we cannot solve it without addressing the root cause of the problem. So what is the cause that politicians have to address? Is the desertification and accelerating change in climate caused by some act of God, of nature, something out there? No, no evidence of that. In that case, the only other possibility would be something on Earth is causing it. Now, for thousands of years, we have denied our role while blaming livestock overgrazing for causing desertification. And during my lifetime, we have denied our role while adding fossil fuels as well as livestock to the things we blame for causing the problem. In the last year, almost all scientists have finally acknowledged that humans are causing climate change. I think that's now beyond a now. To this, there's only one possible conclusion. If we are causing it, then management is the cause. How we make the decisions governing our actions on the farm or at government, and not our resources, be they livestock, coal, or oil, is the problem. None of our resources are the problem. Now, what qualifies an old man like me to be even talking to you today about the management that is the cause of climate change? With no time to explain all of that, let me just say this, that what the world's scientists have now acknowledged, I stress through no wisdom on my part, and for various reasons, I came to realize about 65 years ago. As a young scientist responsible for managing large areas of Africa that we were setting aside as future national parks, I was observing severe biodiversity loss and massive environmental degradation under my watch. At the time, I was working with some of Britain and America's top ecologists as mentors and colleagues, and none of us knew what to do. Clearly, as professionally trained scientists, we did not know how to manage even future national parks to avoid environmental destruction in wildest Africa, with no coal, oil, livestock, or corporations to blame. At that point, I switched as an ecologist from studying animals, plants, and soils to studying the role we scientists were playing in the management of resources. Over many years, I first struggled to understand what we scientists were doing to cause such obviously unintended consequences, and then how we might do better. What we are doing wrong is really two small things, easy to correct. But they are both very difficult for society to grasp because they conflict with thousands of years of human beliefs. Beliefs that I myself held because they were self-evident and obvious, and because I was taught to believe them at university. Now, the beliefs are that we make decisions and manage in hundreds of different ways. That's a belief of society for thousands of years. And the belief is that we have a great many tools and possibilities to manage our environment. Nobody can deny those beliefs are thousands of years old and so deep they've assumed scientific validity. At this point, I face a dilemma talking to you. In the time available, I have either to spend it explaining why these beliefs are wrong and that humans make all decisions in the same way, whether they're dictators or democrats, illiterate amateurs, or sophisticated scientific teams, interdisciplinary teams, decisions are made exactly the same way, and that we only have two tools with which to manage our entire environment. Now, I could do that, or I could talk to you about how we could address the dangers that face us in the only way possible, by addressing the root cause. Now, to do both in the time that I've got available is not possible, so I've chosen the latter. We will talk about what we could do to address the root cause. My reason for this will become clear as I go, and then we can discuss. With management being the root cause of the pending global failure of civilization and of the national parks I was first concerned about still being some of our worst examples in the world of biodiversity loss and environmental destruction, let me simplify to clarify. First, let us recognize the difference between the things that we produce or make and the things that we manage. That difference is vital. You know, as farmers, that we produce corn, beans, meat, milk, leather, cotton, timber, etc., while the rest of society produces music, art, literature, and makes billions of artifacts, from toothpicks and pencils to chemicals, vehicles, planes, computers, bridges, roads, bombs, cathedrals, to space exploration vehicles. And we do all of this using energy that we produce from nature: coal, oil, gas, nuclear, biofuels, geothermal, solar, wind. Now, everything that we produce or make, including food and energy, has something in common. Whether they're extremely simple or extremely complicated, they end or stop if we stop producing or making them. They stop if a battery dies or fuel runs out, a part breaks or is missing. They do what they're designed to do and don't have unpredictable emergent properties. A watch tells you the time. A computer computes. Corn, rice, meat or vegetables feed people. Leather or wool clothe people. And electricity lights our homes. Nothing that we produce or make is self-organizing. And thus, no matter how complicated they might be, they are not complex by definition in system science. And problems that occur with everything we make or produce are fairly easy to solve. And so in system science, the problems are called kind problems. So, billions of things in our lives we produce or make rather than manage. They are complicated, they're not complex, they do what they're designed to do, and the problems are kind and easy to solve. So with that clear, and out of the way. What is it that we manage? What we are managing is what the political leaders developing policies have to know if we are to address the management scientists are now acknowledging is the cause of climate change and it is being demanded by our youth of today. We manage only three things. We manage humans, we manage nature, and we manage economies. These we manage, we do not make or produce. And when we look at these things we manage, we recognize different levels of management in society. We manage our lives, our families, our farms, our small communities, but beyond that, everything, including our religions, and making almost all products, we do through creating organizations or institutions to manage at large scale. And through our institutions, government, church, tribal, corporate, or whatever, we manage nature and economies while producing food and all the other things we do today. Now, none of these things we manage stops when people die, a part breaks, battery or fuel runs out, or thousands of species die, or an entire economy collapses. They do not stop, no matter how badly they are damaged by deaths, biodiversity loss, or collapse of an economy. All of them continue, but in a changed form. This is because everything we manage is self-organizing, with emergent properties unpredictable from the components. And these features, self-organizing with emergent properties in systems science, define complexity. Now, another feature of institutions, nature, and economies is that problems that develop are extremely difficult to solve, bordering on impossible. In system science, the problems of complex institutions are called wicked problems, and three of these we have not solved in over 10,000 years, as I will explain. Now, another distinguishing feature is that while the things we make or produce can be produced independent of one another, you can produce corn or meat or whatever independently of other things. None of the things we manage, human institutions, nature, and economy, can ever be separated. They are always managed together as one. So organizations, including businesses, from family farm to large corporation, cannot be managed without simultaneously managing nature and economy. Something that we failed to recognize till about 1984, when the USDA commissioned me over 2 years to put 2,000 scientists and economists through a week of training on the holistic management framework that we were developing. Now that we know that management of institutions, nature, and economies is the root cause of agriculture playing so great a role in climate change, and there is no other cause, I remind you, let's look at these two scales of management a little more deeply. First, the human level of you, the farmers. You can, like all humans, choose to ride a bicycle to work or change the light bulbs. That means you can choose what to produce and how to manage your business, cash flow, and farm. In other words, nature's soil and biodiversity. However, while this is theoretically true, in practice it is not. This is because Government policy controls the economic, legal, and regulatory environment in which you farm or ranch. So let's look at the second level of American mainstream agriculture. We manage nationally through institutions, government, corporations, university, American Farmers Union, American Cattle Beef Association, and agriculture at this scale is overall managed by politicians in Washington developing American agricultural policy. And that results in laws, regulations, taxes, subsidies, research influence that largely dictate to you farmers both what you produce and how you manage nature and your farm's economy. Now, as we look at American agricultural policy, let's just use a little bit of common sense. Your common sense tells you certain things. Cattle that evolved to eat grass have teeth of herbivores. They have a gut microbiome and a digestive system to do so. Yet most farmers feed grain to cattle, harming the health of the cattle, the health of humans, the environment, and the economy. Let's use common sense again. No sane person would produce oil to grow corn to produce fuel. But roughly 40% of US corn is being grown by farmers to make fuel. Let's use another bit of common sense. Agriculture that was based on the evolving biological and ecological sciences should not be based on chemistry and marketing of technology. But the vast majority of farmers are doing so, destroying the very foundation of the nation, its economy, and its cities. Now, with such things being so obvious, self-evident, common sense, why, we have to ask ourselves, are such practices supported by thousands of farmers, by the National Farmers Union, the American Cattlemen's Beef Association, academics, celebrities, billionaires, banks, funding foundations, taxation, subsidies, laws, and regulations? The answer to that question took me half a century, 50 years, to understand. It is because we manage nature and economies at this scale through institutions that are themselves things we manage that are complex with wicked problems. There is the reason. But it took decades to finally understand it. Institutions do what we design them to do, like all the things we make. But being complex with emergent properties, wicked problems occur, and institutions take on a life of their own as soon as they are formed. Institutions, no matter how caring, wonderful, or intelligent, or perfect the human beings managing them, institutions do not behave like a human being. Where you are capable of using common sense, institutions full of highly intelligent people are almost incapable of doing so. Where you are capable of admitting you did something wrong, an error, an institution is almost incapable of doing so and will go against its very purpose that it was formed for, to defend the institution. As the Catholic Church, with millions of wonderful people, has shown over centuries of protecting pedophile priests. And when new discoveries emerge that go against human beliefs, we do not give them awards or anything like that. But when they arise, individuals are capable of understanding and accepting at varying rates from a day or weeks or a month or a year or so. But institutions are incapable of doing so. and they resist such discoveries for 1, 2, or 3 centuries. Nothing has changed since Galileo and Copernicus. Now, let me sum up a bit. You, as farmers like myself, and thousands of people in the regenerative agriculture movement are operating at the human scale. For myself, as I'm one of this group, we are calling for changes in agriculture, mainly poorly defined regenerative agriculture, but sensibly based on the biological sciences. We represent a very low percentage of the agricultural industry and an even more minute percentage, less than 1/10 of the 1% of agricultural production in the US GDP, according to economists advising political leaders. Now, throughout our regenerative movement, writers, artists, documentary filmmakers, bloggers, podcasters, food and health experts, farmers and ranchers, we are managing at that human level, and we're doing everything we can to shift public opinion to the level where we are at least at the policy table, advising political leaders in Washington developing American farm policy. We represent a tiny little David, putting all of our faith in changing agricultural policy through shifting public opinion. I and the Savory Institute and the many people collaborating in our ecological outcome verification program, our land to market program, we are doing everything they can to ensure consumers that your products are truly regenerative, support you in this magnificent effort so vital for the future. Now, opposing our view in Washington is Goliath. Over 90% of the agricultural industry, as far as I can make out, a 90% that is investing about $350 million a year on lobbyists who are already greenwashing regenerative agriculture, prostituting academics and researchers, and indoctrinating the public. All of this and more, funded again, I remind you, by ecologically illiterate billionaires, corporate boards, and CEOs who, while vilifying livestock, are now investing millions of dollars in manufacturing artificial meat. And almost all of this policy influence of Goliath is bought with money in an economy that is built on debt and a foundation of quicksand. There is no foundation. An economy built on a foundation not of agriculture and food, but on hedge fund management, selling short, futures trading, derivatives, stocks, real estate bubbles, high-tech startups or currency exchanges, etc., unable to sustain any city, business, or culture ultimately. We, tiny little David, face Goliath, and we need to remind ourselves that our entire movement, and I include writers, documentary producers, podcasters, artists, there are many people in our movement, the chefs, the health food proponents, farmers, ranchers, you, we are calling for agricultural practices to be changed. None of us in our entire movement are calling for government to address the root cause of agriculture playing a major role in climate change. How can I express this so simply that everybody gets it? The cause of the problem is how politicians develop policy. There is no other cause at this scale. That is undeniable logic. Some of us are calling for our practices that we favor based on biological sciences to be noticed by the politicians enough to go to scale through changing public opinion. Others, let's say 90%, are insisting on their practices, and they are so well funded by institutions that they bypass the public opinion and dominate the Washington political lobby. Neither group, David nor Goliath, is calling for the new Biden administration or any government to address the cause of the problem. How political leaders develop policy with the institution of government managing economy and nature. None of us are calling for that. How long will it take? 20 years, 50 years, 100 years to get to the policy table in Washington as equals with Goliath, when even the National Farmers Union, the US government, Cattlemen's Beef Association, organizations we farmers manage, don't support us? And when we get to the policy table, 50 or 100 years from now, how will we do any better when we have only got expertise in production based on the biological sciences and no expertise in how to develop policy managing institutions and through them nature and economy? We will do no better when we get there. A little bit like dogs chasing motor cars that don't know what to do with them when they catch a car. We need to have the humility to acknowledge that 20-odd civilizations in all regions of the world have already failed because of their agriculture damaging the environment. Many of these civilizations had simpler economies based on charter, trade and barter. They had smaller institutions and populations, and everything they produced was organic and grass-fed that we call sustainable today. They failed, as Rebecca Costa wrote in her book, The Watchman's Rattle, because their societies could not address the complexity of rising population and deteriorating environment due to agriculture. They failed for the same reason we now face global failure of civilization, because our political leaders, democratic or dictators, do not know how to manage complexity of the three things we manage. Now, this is not a doomsday talk. I don't give those sort of talks. So let me talk about what we can do that would result in sound agricultural policy, truly regenerating the economy, society, and nature. What could we do? I know that you and every American, like every human, wants a better life, better education and health, cleaner water and air, healthier food, more prosperity, with a brighter future for your grandchildren. Now, if agricultural policy is not developed in a context like that, and it continues to be developed, influenced by special interest lobbies, then you and I know that the future of our grandchildren is one of violence and suffering unimaginable today and never before seen in the world. So my suggestion to you is that you continue doing everything you are doing so well today. Whether you're a farmer, a rancher, filmmaker, writer, chef, podcaster, or you have a Facebook page supporting soil, building soil, I urge everyone in the regenerative movement, from farmers, as I say, to filmmakers, writers, etc., keep doing what you are doing to change public opinion. However, while doing so, I would urge all of you, all of us, to do one simple thing, and that is to look at what Buckminster Fuller called the trim tab, the place where a little effort produces great result. All politicians in the world, whether dictator or democratic president, develop policy in exactly the same reductionist way, as we discovered 40 years ago. Now, for the political leaders in America's large democracy to change the way that institutions develop policy is best compared with us trying to change the course of an aircraft carrier with a canoe paddle in our hands. But the rudders of aircraft and aircraft carriers have trim tabs on them that produce great effect with very little effort or energy. The trim tab, I believe, in the American democratic system is congressional testimony. The provision in this country for leaders to stage an inquiry and hear testimony under oath and directly without any institution blocking or filtering knowledge that gets to them on any matter of national concern. Now that us scientists have acknowledged that management is the cause of climate change, I urge you simply to call for congressional inquiry and testimony, for Congress to look into the management that is the root cause of desertification, megafires, and climate change. A chance for political leaders to learn what institutions have been blocking for decades. Why do our leaders not know that some of the worst land in the nation, demonstrating biodiversity loss and desertification, contributing to climate change, is land managed by the Federal National Parks Service? Why do even research plots established over 50 years ago to prove that overgrazing causes desertification, before government of the time shot 50,000 sheep to stop it, prove the opposite, and yet not a single peer-reviewed paper has ever been published by any government, university, or environmental organization? Why is it that even the Aldo Leopold Memorial Forest on the Rio Grande River is an example of severe biodiversity loss and desertification, and not a single publication, again, by any institution, be it Audubon or Sierra or government agency or university, not a single one? Why, when hundreds of people in the US Soil Conservation Service, as it used to be called, concluded in the 1980s that their own soil conservation policy would increase soil erosion in America, was further training in such policy analysis banned by the very agency that had commissioned it? I could go on, but the point is made. All of this, political leaders expected to develop policy are unaware of because of three wicked problems, long known to social scientists, but not to political leaders. They were never known to me when I was a president of a political party. It took decades of research to bring it all to light. Something congressional testimony could make known and public, with all institutions able to give evidence alongside independent scientists like myself and others, alongside farmers, ranchers, and individuals who are human beings within those institutions that do not act like a human does. I stress none of such testimony would criticize any person, because no person is causing the wicked problems of institutions. It is purely how large institutions behave and have done for thousands of years. And it is through such institutions that we humans have to manage nature and economies. Frankly, global desertification, megafires, and climate change should have been put on a war footing decades ago. This issue is even more serious than the COVID pandemic being put on such a footing by the president now. We need to help political leaders, not criticize them, as we unite to face climate change. While all we are doing to shift public opinion is wonderful, I believe we can do better and faster by regenerative farmers, ranchers, supporting writers, etc., our whole movement concentrating on achieving congressional inquiry as the trim tab in American democratic society. The decision is going to be yours. Keep doing what you're doing and expect success with a lot of luck within maybe a century. Or keep doing what you're doing, but concurrently bring about congressional inquiry into the cause of American agricultural policy leading to desertification, megafires, and climate change. Now, a significant side benefit will be that if this is done, it will also alert political leaders how to develop not only agricultural policy, managing nature, but also energy policy, producing energy from nature so unsuccessfully today. For the sake of future generations, I hope you will heed the wisdom of the revered American scientist Buckminster Fuller and put serious and urgent effort into moving the trim tab in the US political system so that future generations can have hope more sensible than praying for a high-tech solution or billionaires offering multi-million-dollar prizes for carbon sequestration, geoengineering, the climate, or colonizing space. Thank you. So let's have questions and discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Allan. Thanks for a really inspiring presentation. For just a reminder, if everyone would please put their questions into the Q&A tab down below. That's going to be the best way for us to manage the discussion moving forward. Allan has very generously agreed to hang around for questions for the remainder of the session. So please get your questions into the Q&A tab. So perfect point. Someone just put it in the chat. If you would go down to the bar below the chat that says Q&A, please put your questions into the Q&A. So we have the first question I'll put forward that is near and dear to my heart is there are a number of folks on the call that are delegates to the National Farmers Union Policy Making Convention next month. What sorts of policies should they be putting forward that should address some of the challenges that you talked about?
None. They cannot put policy forward because they don't have the facilitation skills to manage the complexity. But if they would be a wonderful organization to suggest a congressional inquiry into the cause, just like I said. That's a perfect organization to request it. Now, once that happens, and we can hear all points of view, all right, it'll become clear to lawmakers how policy can be developed. Now, while I'm saying this to you, because the American system is so big, I'm saying the same in Britain, where the bureaucracy is so big, or Germany or France. But in Uruguay and Zimbabwe and small countries with more autocratic governments or small populations, we don't have to use this trim tab approach. We're actually getting people to talk to the president direct. America is too large to do that. So here, that's the first question is wonderful. There's a perfect organization to start requesting congressional inquiry into the cause. And then when we all understand the cause, policy will be developed.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And actually, I'm going to take questions and I'm going to ask people to unmute on there and ask their questions live. This will take Diane and Evan next, if you guys want to unmute and ask your question. Okay, let's see.
Harrison, yeah, I just allowed them to talk. So
Great.
it takes a minute.
Okay, that works. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. So my question was, Alan, you had mentioned kind of near the end of your talk, geoengineering. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on geoengineering and its effect on agriculture as well as climate change. If you could just elaborate on that, that'd be great.
I don't actually think I need to. It says what it says, geoengineering, using technology to change the climate. I can guarantee you, I can promise you, I can stake my life on it, that'll be the end of civilization.
Can you maybe
you cannot solve a biological problem with technology. You see, humans, I said there were two beliefs. One belief was that we had thousands of ways of making decisions. No, we've discovered that all humans make decisions the same way. So I don't know you, but I know how you make your decisions in your family. Every human does it the same, and every government does it the same. The second thing is humans believe in technology because we cannot do anything. All of you listening to me, none of you right now can even drink water or milk without using technology, unless you go to the river and drink with your hands and mouth, or you go to the nearest cow and suck with your mouth. We cannot do anything without technology. We are tool-using animals. And for 2 million years or whatever, we've had one tool, technology, sticks and stones, and we couldn't change our environment. Then we got our second tool, fire, and then we could melt the stones and go into the copper, the bronze, the Iron Age, and make all of the technology available to us today. The clothes you're wearing, the room I'm in, everything in this room was made possible by fire. The computer we're using was made possible by fire. And for 99.99% of human existence, we've had only two tools, technology and fire. Now, the only other possibility that we humans came up with was the idea of resting the environment, what we now call conservation, to let it recover. But as I said in the TED talk, over 2/3 of the world, that causes desertification. So we've got two tools. Now you can see why, as the problem gets so desperately serious, the world's top scientists are saying we have to geoengineer the climate because we've only got technology. And so that was the second shattering thing we came up with, or discovery, was that we cannot solve this problem without livestock. And for that, I've gone through 50 years of persecution and ridicule. But now the world is beginning to talk about it. So geoengineering, there's no hope. We've been trying to do that. I mean, you can look at the planting of trees. That is, in a way, is geoengineering. We're using technology to plant trees. We're giving Nobel Prizes for it, all right? The Chinese are planting millions of trees. Millions of dollars are being spent to plant a belt of trees right across Africa to stop the desert spreading. I promise you they'll fail. They've failed for thousands of years. People have been doing that. In the UAE, where I've been and photographed it and looked at it, they spent over $30 billion on less than 1% of the land, geoengineering, using technology to plant trees to change the climate. The desert is just marching through it.
So, Alan, just to clarify, then it sounds like you're saying that it's another tool of technology, and it's going to, try to affect the biological system. And so maybe, I guess I'm not sure that everybody even knows what that term means. Maybe you could clarify that.
Well, it means using technology to engineer the climate, to manage the climate.
Great.
And you can see why we think we can do it, because we've only got technology and fire.
Awesome. Thank you. MJ, do you want to get the next question?
Sure, we have let me start my video. We have a few folks asking very similar questions, so I'll try to put them together, but the consensus is, how do we keep, in congressional inquiry, how do we keep big ag, or quote unquote conventional ag, from co-opting congressional inquiry, and the latter part of that is, what else, how can we push this agenda forward? Do we need to write politicians, call senators, that sort of thing?
Okay, let me answer the first part. You don't want to exclude big ag. You don't want to exclude any university, the USDA, the World Wildlife Fund, or any of these people. You don't want to exclude them. You want them to come and give evidence. You must hear everybody's point of view. Nobody should be silenced. What is happening, and has happened for a long, long time, is those institutions have silenced independent scientists, etc. We just got to stop that. So you've got little David and Goliath is silencing David. Just if you try to get these to equal, where they can both be heard through public opinion, that we know from research can take 200 years or more. It took 200 years just to get the institution of the Royal Navy to accept that lime juice would stop scurvy. 1 million sailors died. It was vital to Britain's future. The Royal Navy, led by brilliant men, that took 200 years. And then the Merchant Navy, led by brilliant men, it took them another 70 years. Nothing has changed. That's how institutions behave. So you want the institutions to come and give evidence. Make it public, so that all the public and the lawmakers begin to understand. And then also individuals within those institutions can start to give evidence. Like, if I could give an example of that right now, a very powerful university in America does not allow any paper to be published if it cites my work, okay, my textbook. But they will allow my handbook to be cited. It's 100% my work, but they'll allow that to be cited. Why? The reason is, and I know this because individuals within institutions are human. And so a professor there has informed me why that is. And it's because the institution will not allow my textbook to be cited because I'm the senior author. My handbook, a different person, my wife, is the senior author. Just academic egos will not allow recognition because academic egos are tremendous vested interest. So, that's where an individual can, when over all the years that I was battling, when I was banned from even setting foot on any campus of any university for over 20 years in Southern Africa, individuals within government and universities were feeding me information. So we just want to get humans able to talk and give testimony. So including the institutions and people within them. Nobody should be silenced because nobody is at fault. We're just heeding science now and research. that institutions do not behave like a human. But we have to manage at large scale through institutions. So how do we do it? And we know how to do it today. But again, it was banned and silenced by the USDA.
Great, thank you. The latter part of that question was, and this has come in again, but Sharon asks, there are entrenched power structures in the United States which have successfully thwarted action on climate change. How do we influence those power structures? Through boycotts, peaceful protests, become a part of those structures and influence them from within?
No, you don't. Look, the power of institutions became so great at one point that the British East India Company had their own judges. They had an army apparently bigger than Britain's. They passed death sentences. And the leaders in the world at that time realized they had to break that extreme corporate power. And so they did, all right? And no corporation has its own judges, can pass death sentences today. But corporations, being institutions, have in fact are influencing the world through monetary policies, bribing, prostituting research and researchers and universities and academics and people who need the big funding. So just nobody's to blame for that. All we need to do is make lawmakers fully aware of it so that they can then begin to develop policy in a national, holistic context, addressing the complexity and acknowledging that you cannot solve the desertification and the megafires that are now so bad in America. It is simply impossible to solve those with technology and fire. No cattlemen's organization is yet acknowledging that. So it's not just big corporations, it's our own cattlemen's organizations, because they're institutions. There are not enough farmers, ranchers, yet able to influence our own institutions. So we shouldn't be blaming corporations or anyone else. Let's stop the blaming. Let's start looking at the cause.
Great, thank you very much. This next question comes from Elizabeth Aggie, and her question has to do with collaborations with the business and entrepreneurial side of the economy. How do we work with entrepreneurs and the business community? And do you think working with people, that are calling for massive carbon reduction or who are calling for funding innovation is an effective way to go about accomplishing our goals?
It's fine. Keep doing it, but you'll have a good time. You're doing good things. You'll feel good doing it, but God help your grandchildren, because you're not addressing the cause of the problem. And your common sense tells you you've got to address the cause of the problem. So for example, just let me take three things. Today, there's a lot of talk about carbon sequestration and how much carbon the grasslands of the world can take. And so researchers are researching this, and there's debate and so on and so forth. There are an awful lot of people saying that, for example, that cattle put off methane, and methane is a very bad greenhouse gas. And then you've got an awful lot of people saying we have to be vegan. We mustn't kill, we mustn't eat meat. The world just cannot keep eating meat like this. So we all need to be vegan. And now those people and billionaires and so on are investing millions in manufacturing meat. Now, all of these three things are simply discussion, argument, academic, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic while the goddamn ship is sinking. Now, why do I say that? Let me make an assumption that we know is wrong. Let us assume that the world's grasslands could absorb no carbon at all. Let us assume that cattle put out 20, 50 times the methane that they do. Let's assume that we never kill another cow in our lives. all humans become vegans. Okay, take those as givens. If we had that tomorrow, I would simply say to the world's leaders, the politicians, how are you going to stop the desertification and the mega fires of America and climate change? You're not. So you see, we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. That we need millions more animals on the land, but that goes against human belief. The science is very clear, but academics keep attacking me and never ever study the work. If you did what I said earlier, how would you, if you just look at right across North Africa up into China, that's a vast area, far bigger than the United States. And all those millions of humans can only feed themselves off livestock on 95% of the land. So if you did the things I said earlier, are those millions of people just going to pour into Europe and create incredible violence and collapse the countries of Europe? People aren't, institutions are not using common sense. And I wish some scientist somewhere would tell us how you could ever deal with this biological problem of just desertification and megafires using fire and technology.
Well, Allan, you just mentioned, getting more cattle on the land, and this big push for everyone to go vegan or eat this fake meat. So AJ has a great question. AJ Carrillo asks, do you have any suggestions for how to benefit the public image of regenerative agriculture most effectively? What methods do you see having the most positive leverage to make that change?
I have no skill in that area, and there are people with far greater skills than me on how to do that. What I would say, though, is that I'm very, very worried at the moment because not only are institutions beginning to greenwash, but people in regeneration are demeaning the word. So today, we're not just talking of regenerative agriculture, we're talking of regenerative tourism, regenerative this, regenerative that. The word is just being bandied around. And almost everybody I talk to and just say to them, what is agriculture? They have no idea. They talk about crops and livestock. That's not agriculture. It's only a part of agriculture. Agriculture is the production of food and fiber from the world's land and water. The whole planet virtually is now engaged in agriculture, and only 6% of the surface is cropland. So 94% of agriculture is not cropland, the surface of the earth. And if we look at the land area of the earth, it's only 20%. So 80% is not non-cropland. So forestry, wildlife management, all of these things are agriculture that we need to be paying attention to. Fisheries, all of these things. How many people in the regenerative agricultural movement are talking about the fisheries in the oceans? I don't ever see it. See, we're demeaning the whole thing. So we're part of the problem too. And I just think that I don't know how to deal with this. I mean, I've been struggling all my life to learn and understand what I've told you today.
Allan, I'm going to shift over a little bit to sort of a practice-based question. This comes from Uji McGuire. We are right now in Colorado at least, about to enter our second year of potential extreme drought. And Uji asks, what do you recommend on our farms and ranches to adjust to being more appropriate for our climate in the face of extreme droughts?
Okay, with droughts, I began changing my thinking in 1960. We had a terribly severe drought in Africa at the place where Botswana, Rhodesia, and South Africa joined. And we have a river system there, the Limpopo River. And the headwaters of that river are in those three countries. And we had this terrible drought, and we were raising money for drought relief, and governments were stepping in and everything else. Now, I was a research officer responsible for a big chunk of that country. And the data was showing that it was our sixth highest rainfall ever. And while we were doing all these drought relief measures with the farmers and ranchers, and 50,000 head of game died that I was responsible for managing, all right, I couldn't help but notice that the International Red Cross was collecting money for the flood victims in Mozambique. Where the hell was their flood coming from? It was coming from us. And that began to change my thinking and what I'd been taught at university. And I began to realize, oh my God, we're making these droughts. They're not acts of nature. They're our land management. So now where we are today is there are what are called meteorological droughts, genuine drops in rainfall over a period for a very long time. They're relatively rare, and most droughts, and even international agencies define it this way now, are what they call pastoral droughts or man-made droughts. Now, when you get a natural drought, a genuine drought, if the land management is causing 80% of your droughts to be man-made, they weren't droughts at all, and now you get a genuine drought, it's 10 times as bad. So that's the situation we need to face. Now, we cannot face it because institutions are blocking that information. They've been blocking it since 1960. So the best thing people can do in droughts, and we have many examples of people managing holistic, is just to change the management. All right, you cannot stop the genuine droughts, you can make them a lot worse. And we're doing that right now on our hub in Zimbabwe. We've just gone through our 17th year of rain at or below average. We've never in my lifetime had 17 years of it. Now, all around us is bare ground, dying animals, all these problems. We have just grassland and geese and fish and open water where we haven't seen it for over 100 years. And the difference is management. So people are coming and visiting and training there, but we cannot get that knowledge into institutions, not even cattlemen's institutions. So there's a lot that can be done, but we need to be getting those skills to the farmers, which is what your hubs are doing, hopefully. It's all in the textbook on holistic management, all right? It's well known, but we have to help the politicians and the institutions get it at scale.
Allan, I think I'd like to kind of follow that up with a question that seems to be an amalgam of a few different questions from the audience. Just in terms of the Savory Institute and the work that you guys are doing right now, what do you feels like most exciting or most hopeful in the work that you're currently doing?
Well, we like everybody are doing the best we can. It's to get new knowledge into society. It's extremely difficult. It's never ever been done under 2 to 3 centuries when the new knowledge goes against human beliefs. All right. So we're doing the best we can. And long ago, we took a strategy of, rather than try to do too much at once and cause confusion, we took a strategy of focusing on the world's grasslands where livestock are needed to deal with droughts, desertification, mega fires, etc. To focus on that, because when the first country begins to actually deal with climate change, which no country in the world is yet doing, right, because nobody is attacking the cause, when they do, the area where globally we'll get the highest return for the least effort and the most benefit politically, economically, climate change everywhere is the grasslands. So we're focusing on that. Our hubs are focused on that, etc. But concurrently and simultaneously, we've kept trying to alert people to the real problem and the policy level. And at our conference this year, we took the decision to put more emphasis on the policy, because otherwise we'll feel good, we'll make great progress, and even if we made 10 times the progress over the next 50 years, we still, as I said in my talk, will be at the policy table and nobody will be talking about how to develop policies dealing with institutions, nature, and economy. How many people in the regenerative agriculture are talking about the economy in it? How many are talking about the problem of institutions in it? We're only talking about agricultural practices. See, so of the three things we're managing that have to be managed simultaneously, we in our movement are only talking about one of them, really. So our chance of success, unless we change emphasis, that worries me a lot. And now I speak personally. You know, I'm 85 now, and I might look all right, but I run on spare parts and batteries. Thank God for technology. But I've only got a few more years left, and I'm more worried now for young people than I've ever been in my life. So the remainder of my life, I would just do everything I can to get us to focus on the cause. So we're doing the same as everybody. We're just doing the best we can, making wonderful progress, increasing more and more people collaborating, wonderful leadership from Daniela and the whole team and the Savory Institute. I'm out of running any of that, and doing the best we can like everybody, but also recognizing that while doing that, we need to focus on policy.
Great. And we have a few folks asking for you to clarify the root cause again, and if you have any specifics on the changes we can make in management and management of policies.
Okay, just to clarify the root cause again. When scientists acknowledge that humans are causing it, all right, even then, when acknowledging that, humans have not recognized that that means management, because they've said we are causing it, and they've gone on to blame livestock, coal, and oil. So just think about that for a moment. Livestock are a resource. They'll be needed for centuries to come. Coal and oil are resources with large carbon molecules. They'll be needed for centuries to come to manufacture things, etc. It is management and policy that leads to how livestock have been run for thousands of years that led to desertification, not the livestock. They weren't guilty. And it is management and policy that chooses to call coal and oil fossil resources, fossil fuels, and burn them at a rapid rate. So do you see, just logic tells you if we acknowledge that we are causing the problem, then it is management. And that's why I talked about management now, saying what is it we manage and at what scales do we manage it? And how could we address the cause of the problem? Does that help clarify it? Now, the second part of the question is, you know, what could we change in, say, policy? You have to leave that to the people developing policy, because you have to have a context or a reason. At the moment, the reason that we farmers accidentally do the wrong thing, that everybody does when managing, and nobody's to blame, is because we, like governments, make every decision with the context or reason for the decision being to meet a need, a desire, or address a problem. Think of your own lives, every one of you listening now. And I'll bet you that 99% of the decisions in your life, I'm not talking about instinctive, like when your hand touches a hot stove. You won't think, what decision do I make? You'll just pull your hand away. Every decision that you make to meet a need you have, to meet a desire you have, or to address a problem. That is the cause of the problem, because nature and economies are complex. And it's like having a context with no reason. Like, I'm going to light a fire. Should I? Nobody knows whether I should or shouldn't till you know the context. And if it's to cook my food in a stove, it's sensible. If it's just lighting a fire, I could burn the house down. You see, so need, desire, and addressing a problem are good reasons for a decision. They're not a good context. So what we do now at any level, from the household to government policy, is we have to develop a context. How do all humans want their lives to be, tied to their life-supporting environment and their behavior? And then we have a context, and now we can develop policy. But until then, that's why you see me keeping out of all the discussions on carbon sequestration and all these things, because there's no context. People are just trying to meet a need or solve a problem.
Great, thank you. I think that's really helpful when we talk about, let's all get a context together. I think we have a little bit more time. We have Jim Parker raising his hand. We can allow to talk here. And Jim, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Allan, one of the significant things that I heard you say that I don't think we understand well, and that I think a large group of people using the internet tool that we have today can spread it, is that you said that 94% is brittle, and that 94%, and then use the example of South Africa, that 94% is the watersheds of the world. And so somebody asked you about drought. If we don't address the problem of that 94%, instead of this postage stamps that we're trying to, that the soil conservation is trying to get green manures on, which is great, but it's ignoring the fact that the droughts are caused by that 94%.
Jim, can I correct a thing? I never did say that. I said 94% of the planet's surface is non-cropland agriculture.
But that's not the watershed?
No, that's the oceans. Oceans are not the watershed.
Oh.
A lot of that's the oceans. And now, of the land, if you take the land, take the oceans out of it, and take the land surface of the world, what I said in the TED talk is roughly 2/3 of it, very roughly, and you can see it in the NASA pictures, is seasonal rainfall. It has wet periods and dry periods, and roughly 1/3 of it is perennially humid. And that's why Britain and France aren't turning to desert. East and west coasts of most parts of America are not turning to deserts. That's why mob grazing, rotational grazing, and all these grazing systems that people are promoting today are not turning the more humid areas to desert. But that is all of those techniques of grazing animals, mob grazing, high intensive grazing, all these grazing systems and rotations, if you actually apply them in the North Africa, for instance, they cause desertification. And that's one of the difficulties we have, is how do you keep information from getting distorted? Because if you go back to the TED Talk, I said that we finally solved the problem of desertification by recognizing that 10,000 years of mob grazing, people moving their animals, incredible tie to their environment, holistic thinking, had led to the great deserts of the world. So we know we shouldn't be doing that. And then I said we'd had over 100 years of us scientists and grazing systems, and rotational grazing systems, any number of them. And they accelerated desertification. They worked in the humid areas, but in most of the world, they accelerated desertification. And I said we had to go back to the drawing board. I had to say, who in the world has solved this problem in any other profession? And that's when I looked at the military, because over 300 years, the armies of the world had learned to deal with extremely complicated situations, as that is, by a process of planning in immediate battlefield conditions. And I simply adopted 300 years of army experience to solve the problem. Now, people hear, oh, mob grazing, just bunch your animals, mimic nature. And that's going to aggravate the problem in many such parts of the world.
Okay, I understand that, but you didn't get my question. And maybe I didn't phrase it well. But on our ranch, we used your practices, which are not on the grazing management you just addressed, but we're using that tool, but monitoring what happened. And we had streams that were dried up, springs that were dried up, and went at least a mile when we started really practicing well. So if you apply that to Colorado, that practice, most of which is about 94% desertified, and reverse that, what impact does that have on the available water downstream through the Colorado River? We need to identify something that we can say, look at and say, yes, this works. We need to figure out how do we replicate that before you change policy.
Yeah, if I could answer your question, and let me see if I get it right this time. If the non-cropland, the forests, the grasslands, etc., of Colorado, if policy changes and all education, training, ranches, etc., begin to practice, use livestock as a tool, not just to produce meat, but as a tool to restore the environment. If they do that through the holistic planned grazing process, not through any grazing system or anything else, if they do that, I worked out figures for New Mexico, which is nearby, some time ago. I'm quoting from memory now, so don't quote me on this exactly, but I worked out that if we did that in New Mexico, which is close to you, and we made just 1 inch of rain more effective. In other words, by doing that, we got 1 inch of rain to not run off the surface, go into the soil, and not leave the soil except through plants. If we did that, which is very easy to do with holistic plan grazing process, it would equal, I think it was 2 or 3 times the new water every year of Elephant Butte Dam, which at the time it was built was the biggest dam in America. And it would cost no money to do it. It would make money to do it, if you manage economy, nature, institutions together. So that is what is possible as soon as policy is developed holistically.
And there's the hope. We know how to do this.
So,
but it's not being done.
Right. Thank you.
Alan, we've got 5 minutes left. I'd like to offer you those 5 minutes to bring us some closing thoughts, and thank you again for all of your thoughtful commentary through the question session and through the presentation.
Oh, thank you for that. I wasn't expecting it, but so this is just straight from my heart. I said I'm more worried now than any time in history. I went through over 20 years of war, civil war in my country, played a very active role. We had 3 armies and 4 political parties in the war, and I'm the last of the political leaders of one of those parties left. Now, throughout that, in a similar way, I constantly warned that what we were doing would win every single battle. And we did. We never lost a single battle in 20 years of civil war. But I guaranteed that we would lose the war, and we did. And I feel myself in the same position now. If we keep doing what we're doing, we'll make amazing progress. We'll feel good. We must keep doing it. I'm not discouraging that. But if we don't focus on policy, God help your grandchildren. So my appeal to you is that of the people listening to me, if 500 of you say that's a good idea, let's try it, nothing will change. If 1, 2, or 3 of you say, I got it, we're going to change policy through the trim tab. We're going to achieve congressional inquiry into the cause of agriculture endangering the future of our grandchildren. If 2 or 3 have got that and are determined to do it, it will happen. So my appeal is it's over to you. Think of your grandchildren.
Great. Thank you so much. It was really an honor to have you a part of our conference today, and to have you speak to our conference attendees, especially considering the virtual context. So thank you so much for working with us. Thank you, David and MJ and everybody who helped to coordinate this. I want to quickly just let y'all know this is sort of a little break time. It's a time to check out folks, check out some of our sponsors, check out some of our other elements in the platform, join a chat group, join a community, message speakers, message other conference attendees and network, or just take a little bit of you time. The next sessions are going to get underway at 10:30. That's going to be Making Small Farms Work with Richard Perkins, Utilizing Nature's Energy to Achieve Animal Performance with Ian Michael Ines, and The Grain and the Art of Cooperation with Liz Carlisle, George Cheney, Nana Myers, Chris Gosar, Andy Clark, and Sarah Jones. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed this morning's presentation, and we look forward to seeing you again in just 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks all.
Bye. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.